Welcome to Opina with Liliana Ospina. I'm very excited because today I have a very special guest. Her name is Danette Duron-Willner. And we are excited because this is a space for Hispanics that are making positive changes in Michigan and in the world. And we want to talk about their story, what they do, and share the experiences to motivate you to be a better person and to keep changing this world. So welcome, Danette. Thank you for your time. Danette, tell me about your story. You are right now, you are a business owner. You are also a Hispanic in a very high position in a multinational. But who is Danette?
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity and talking a little bit more. When you launch this right now to say like how we inspire each other, it's humbling to know that you thought I would inspire through my story. So I really have a lot of gratitude for that space to talk about like my journey and if it can help someone relate to like, I never thought about doing something different like that. My parents are actually from Sonora, Mexico, and I have my entire family in Arizona, but I moved here. I like to say in the 1900s I moved here to sound super old, but I moved here to Michigan to go to law school. And at the time there's no one in my family that did that. I was the first to really leave the state of Arizona to come and do something like that. But there were a few things that really made me committed to wanting to see how I could show up to help with justice, to show up to help with advocating for equal opportunities, not only for Latinos, but for historically underrepresented communities and people living in them. When I graduated from the University of Arizona, two things were going on for me at that point. One, I started working in nonprofit and public housing projects in the south of Tucson, where the projects hadn't been updated, since the 60s, since the 1960s. And so HUD decided to invest millions of dollars in renovating public housing, and they needed a director that could help with a lot of the community development that would go around that. So getting input from the community members, Latinos all mostly, in the public housing in South Tucson, and be able to see what they needed in this reimagined housing. I knew that nonprofit is what I wanted to make a difference in. And prior to that, about 2 years prior to me graduating from the U of A, my brother was murdered. And that experience of losing someone in an act of injustice is really what grounded me in a commitment to start to examine what's my role in this. If I'm going to make a difference to now our family being really devastated and broken by the loss and by the tragedy, I knew that there was a space for me with my voice in the area of justice and equity. So I think that was probably what turned me to think I really want to see where my voice lies in this. That's what drove me to law school, was to see, is this where I have my larger voice? Working in nonprofit was making a difference. But Liliana, I remember this very clearly. I was talking to community members about where they wanted to see things located within their community. And all the moms, in public housing at the time where I was working, it was my majority moms, very few male figures in the community. And they said, well, definitely we want the kitchen sink by a window, and the window needs to overlook the center courtyard, because if somebody's not behaving, we're going to go out and take care of it right away. So the moms were like, nope, we want eyes on our kids. And then another mom said, and we want all of the bedrooms in the back of the house. And I said, in the back of the house? Yeah, because when there's drive-by shootings, we don't want our kids to be hit by a bullet in the front of the house. I was speechless. I mean, my family had grown up in housing insecurity. My mom was a single parent from the time I was 10. And I mean, we knew rough times, but this was a different reality. And I had never stopped to consider that the basic safety of your children and where they slept was a priority in the place you called home, the location. All of these things just seemed to come together to say, what's next for me? Where do I have a broader voice? And start to find ways to empower others to find their voice, to find what their rights are. So that's kind of the story of what brought me to Michigan. I had never even been this side of the Mississippi River, so I drove with this red pickup truck, and at the time I had a pit bull boxer mix, so he was in the passenger seat. I wrapped all my stuff up in a blue tarp, muy fancy, and drove out to Michigan not knowing anybody. Starting law school, finished law school, passed the bar, and have been here ever since. I find Michigan to be, I call it home now. I don't know, I think my sisters would be upset to hear that, but it is home. I mean, it's beautiful here. And while I still have roots and family in Mexico and Arizona, some in Florida, some in California, Michigan has become my home base, and where I've continued on the promise I made myself to find opportunities to mentor, to lift up those that haven't quite found their place or their voices, to advocate when possible in ways that I hope make a positive impact. So between doing things in the field of equal employment opportunity, labor and employment law, you mentioned my business, which I adore, the opportunity to help other small businesses with their HR and compliance work. It's an opportunity to give that legal expertise, but proactively with good HR practices, so that small businesses don't find themselves having to pay an arm and a leg if they do something wrong and have to hire an attorney. Like the chance to get out ahead of it, to have strong practices from the onset. So, that's, I feel like I glazed over so much of the impact that Michigan has made for me, but when I graduated from law school, I started with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights as a civil rights investigator. Absolutely can say that was an amazing, amazing experience. There's still some really passionate, talented, and hardworking people advocating for civil rights in the state of Michigan. Even today, even in this climate, the work still continues. It's still important. And then after doing that for a while, I discovered I needed to start seeing how corporations function in that way. It was one thing to work for the state in enforcement, but I had student loans to pay off. I paid for all of my schooling on my own from undergraduate through law school. So I needed to find a way to do right and pay that off. So I decided, let me go ahead and see what I can do, what kind of difference I can make with compliance within companies. And honestly, Liliana, like that first 6 months that I transitioned from state government to private sector, I think I cried about every day. Because I was like, I'm a fish out of water. I don't see myself represented here. Here I am talking about like civil rights and opportunities for everyone, and there weren't other Latinos around, so now I felt a little more awkward. There wasn't a lot of representation at that time when you talked about leadership in corporate settings, when you talked about, board of directors. It was slim. It was slim to see yourself reflected in positions of leadership and authority. So I felt a little like a fish out of water. And I found, though, that by building community, finding people who were solid in their values and looking to make the same kind of difference that I was, that slowly it started to snowball into meeting like similarly minded people who really did want to see equity in our workplaces, valued diversity in our workplaces, and we're doing work to ensure that stayed as a focal point for the companies where I've worked. So I've worked, for a number of multinationals, Fortune 500s, and in roles from diversity manager to director of employment law and litigation to director of diversity, and all the while keeping that commitment to myself, like doing right, seeing where I can make a difference in the space, making more equitable opportunities for people to come up and help people up at the same time. So I hope that wasn't long-winded, but that's a lot of like what led me here.
It.
Yeah.
I love it because, I mean, just agreed coming alone with your dog to a new place, alone, without your family, because Latinos, we are all about family.
Ay, no me digas. Oh my gosh, the scandal of me doing that. Oh, my mom was so upset. She was so upset, but I'm like, this is my opportunity. I did a summer bridge program through the University of Arizona's law school, and I knew that I needed to go somewhere where they could help pay for part of it. And I got invitations from 2 universities, one in Iowa and here in Michigan. So it wasn't as if I was going to stay in the Southwest. The opportunity didn't come to me there. It came to me here.
So it was meant to be. That's amazing. As you were talking about the mistakes. A lot of Latinos, they open more business than any other minority. I'm a business owner too, and like last year I spent a lot of money with lawyers. But what's the common mistake we made as business owners? Like you talk about compliance and all that, and human resources, because I mean, I had one employee basically, and but there are small companies that have more employees, and they don't really pay attention to those type of regulations, and then they made big mistakes, and it cost them a lot of money, and some of them had to close their business because of the fees.
Because of the mistakes they make. I think first and foremost, starting your own business means that you've got the ganas to go to the distance, right? So like there's nothing wrong with doing that. And you've got the drive and the determination and the vision to make it happen. What happens is when you start to grow and you have more people working for you, are they 1099s? Are they independent contractors? Are they going to be temporary? How do you fluctuate with the growth of your business? What kind of employment relationship do you have? Questions start then. And if you don't get the practice down really well at that point, it makes for a line of bad decisions on top of each other. And where that becomes most painful is when you have about 10, 15, 20 employees, and you never establish the practices about the roles and expectations and employment handbooks and what were you going to have these people do, how much were you paying them, were they salaried, were they hourly? Like if you didn't start that, then it just means that when you have 15 to 20 and then more employees, the good practices haven't been established. And so that's where the risk grows much more significantly than if you just had a handful of employees, 2 or 3 employees. There's an opportunity to right course if something goes wrong. But when you start getting more employees and you didn't establish those practices around how are you paying people? What kind of jobs are you expecting of them? If you're doing it hourly, what are your considerations? If you've got people you have to accommodate, it grows exponentially. By the time you hit 50 employees, you definitely have more obligations and regulations to comply with. If you're a small business and you start doing business with the federal government, right? Let's say you get a contract. Now you've got all kinds of other requirements that come with that in terms of reporting and being on top of your employee base if you're taking money from a federal contract, for example. I wish I could tell you more about what that looks like, but that's changing every day in our landscape right now. So it's important to have the practices so that when things do change, you know exactly where to tweak it, and you keep business moving smoothly if you can get those practices early on.
So when people see this interview and they said, oh my God, I had 20 employees, what do I do? What's the first thing you do if someone reached out to you and said, okay, I need help? What's the first thing you are suggesting?
So my first question is usually if they're the owner, and that's usually who reaches out, I said, how long have you wanted to fire yourself as the HR director of your company? And they say, a long time. And I ask, why? What happened that made you think, I'm going to need some help here? Because there's always an event. Like I had it, maybe the answer is, I just couldn't keep up with performance management of an entire team. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to listen to the complaints. I've got to make the books. I've got to have the shift. I don't have time to be my own HR person. I want to run my business, not have my business run me. So they all of a sudden realize, like, they didn't get, as a business owner, you don't sign up to be the HR director of your own company. I know very few, unless you have an HR company, that really your passion was around managing people and performance and complaints. Like Nadia, nobody does that. Business owners didn't go into it for that. So that's usually my first question is what was it that led you to want to fire yourself as the HR director of your own company? And that's what launches the conversation on how Clearheaded can customize. Like, what do we do for you as a small business? It's so important, Liana. Like, here's the bottom line. Attorneys make a lot of money if they want to, if they bill for it. But small businesses, they don't have that resource and luxury. If you're first gen like myself, or you weren't taking money from a family member to open your own business, or you're the first one in your family to do it, you don't have that path laid out for you. And I feel like if we can all lean into helping each other, really pioneer that path, then we can start to see a lot of change in our communities, in our economic viability, and the legacy around wealth that we create for our own families. I mean, it's reciprocal. Well, that was the main reason starting Clearheaded means a lot to me. So we're circling, completing our second year in business, and I have loved the clients that have come to find solutions through us.
I don't think most people think of human resources because it's like something they don't want to deal with,
It's something they don't want to deal with, but I'll tell you what made the biggest impression on me. So in the time that I was navigating labor and employment litigation as in-house counsel, I found that at least 80% of the time, in every case, it always came back to what a frontline or mid-level manager failed to do correctly, or something they said that was incorrect, which was like painfully, no, Demi, stop, which was like painfully obvious that the person who takes the hit for that, Liliana, is the manager, the frontline manager, who's had no training, didn't know that they weren't doing the right thing, and now they're being deposed. All of the litigation is like on their shoulders as having done something wrong or failed to do something that they should have done.
Honestly, I never thought about human resources. I always seen it like, okay, before when I was employee, my last job was in Kellogg Corporation, and I was in human resources, and I remember I was doing SAP for Latin America. But that's the only thing it's for me, and I'm sure it's for many people. It's like something, like out of, like something that you're not familiar and you don't want to deal with. That's how I think most people feel about it.
And that's good. That means that they've never had to pay something in a settlement. They've never had a lawsuit filed against their business. But I am one of the people that looks at the federal enforcement agencies. They do press releases of all the companies they have settlements against. And so like the Department of Labor has press releases with the name of companies and what they did in violation of their statutes and how much the settlement is for. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission does the same thing. So if you have, a lawsuit that you lost, the EEOC felt like you didn't handle a situation where someone felt harassed, or you failed to accommodate someone because of a disability, they'll put all your stuff out on the news, on the press release. You could go there right now and probably look at all these businesses that didn't do what they needed to at the timing that they needed to. So unfortunately, that also includes small businesses. So those litigation expenses and settlements, $170,000 to a small business could mean the difference of shutting your doors. $170,000 settlement against a multinational corporation, it's probably in their insurance carrier policy. Like, let's be for real. Like the laws don't apply differently to small businesses as to large corporations. They just hit different. They just make a much bigger difference. So I was just reading the press releases today, and there was a company actually here in Michigan that had, I believe it was a failure to accommodate, and there's just a lot of nuances about how you need to engage an employee and when you need to talk to them and what a reasonable accommodation is, and you don't always get it right. In this case, it was that the person had gone out on leave, and they fired them at the end of the time that their leave expired, which under the ADA is unlawful to terminate someone right away without giving them an opportunity to talk about how you can accommodate them when they come back. And sometimes that accommodation is an extension of leave, even if it's unpaid. So I think it was like $170,000 that they had to pay in that settlement.
That's scary. So what's the best advice that you will tell a small company here in Michigan and in the USA?
Yeah.
Because that's scary, 170.
It is, but continue being fearless. Like, there's people like clear-headed. There's lots of support out there. So find your support network. Find the companies you want to partner with to keep you on the right course. Get a good CPA. Get yourself a good HR business as your side, as your partner. Get a good marketing person. Like, get your community of support in line early on so that as you're growing, your partners are keeping pace with you. So you don't have to stop and worry, did I get that right? Am I scaling correctly? That'd be the biggest advice that I'd have for small business owners. Get your team of trusted collaborators and vendors and businesses and keep it growing. Don't be fearful about it. Would I know the first thing about starting a bakery? Nope. But I know the first thing about helping someone keep that bakery and their employees, be remaining compliant.
And how people can contact you? What's your phone, your email?
Yeah, thank you for that. So the website, actually, this is very exciting. Clearheadedllc.com is the website. But right now, that's how to contact me. Clarity is Key at clearheadedllc.com is the business email. And then you know how to get a hold of me. So if someone reached out to you and you're like, I need help with my business HR practices, then you and I are going to be in touch as well. So I'm open to being contacted. And quite frankly, you can also find me in this is how you and I keep on bumping into each other. The Michigan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, ALPFA, the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce, the Arab Chamber of Commerce. Like, I'm in those spaces intentionally because those are businesses where they might be the first in their family and the first in, at least in their community, they're getting tremendous support, but not by enough trusted partners. So if you think about it, they might find other business owners to collaborate with and talk with, but what they need is subject matter expertise to really keep their bookkeeping, their compliance practices, their marketing, all of that on a path forward. Some programs, Velocity is one of them in Macomb County, Tajara in Dearborn, Oakland Thrive in Oakland County. Washtenaw has its own incubators for small businesses. I think that is another huge, huge recommendation I would give to small businesses, is there are a lot of organizations in your community that want to see your small business succeed. Sign up with them. Make sure that you're taking advantage of the free services that they offer to help your business grow and stay compliant. Like, they're beautiful organizations that really do want to see small businesses succeed.
Thank you, Danette.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the chance, Liliana. I appreciate it so much.